Wow.
I haven't seen this many people gathered in one place since Donald Trump's inauguration.
Oh. That is dark.
And I mean that sincerely. How you doing, Porto? We're glad to be here. This is NDC Porto, Portugal.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say 3 words. Good, cheap wine.
Nah.
What the hell? Where have you been all my life? $2 for a great bottle of wine at the supermarket. That's just unheard of.
Crazy. And we have to talk about Jerry, at least a little bit, right?
Oh, that's our friend that we met when the first day we came here, Jerry Grouper.
Yeah, Jerry Grouper.
Jerry Grouper was a
fish.
He was a fish.
And we ate him.
Yeah.
And he was delicious. And we miss him now, but we're looking forward to meeting some of his friends.
Jerry Grouper. Okay, never mind.
All right, you're going too far.
I know. Well, the way we start off this show is with a couple of items, and mine is called Better Know a Framework, so roll the crazy music. So we don't have music when we do it live.
Actually, it's not that we don't have music here. We never have the music.
No, we never.
The music is always added in afterwards. And so every time you hear us talk about that music on the show, it's a lie.
It's been a long time since I heard. Actually, now that I edit, I've
yeah, you hear it more often
week.
now. We have had occasions where people have started singing the music because we don't actually. But you don't need to do that. That's disturbing.
That happened in Manchester.
Yeah, it did, and they got right into it too.
They were into it.
But you know, we edit every show, right? And he's actually the editor. Every minute of every show goes through, and we fix all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the real show is not that smooth. You're watching the sausage being made. It's always
we
like
may
this.
or may not get through this.
Yeah.
Without messing up.
Things are going to happen. I guarantee it.
All right.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, buddy. What do you got?
I got dad-style programming jokes.
Oh no.
It's a GitHub repo. I swear to God.
Well, at least it's on GitHub, so it's open source.
Yeah, that's right. But dad jokes for programmers. So, how do you get the code for the bank vault?
How?
You check out their branch.
Save me.
This is great. Don't even laugh at any of these.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Sort of the rules.
Yeah. All right. So, what do you call a busy waiter?
What?
A server. What do you call an idle server?
What?
A waiter.
Oh wait, I'm not supposed to laugh.
No laughing.
That was funny.
How many Prolog programmers does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
Yes.
I'm doing this wrong.
Only one
this
more.
Isn't working.
What diet did the Ghost developer go on?
What diet?
Boolean. I don't even get that. That's not even funny.
Boo.
Oh, boo. The Ghost developer.
There you go.
I'm going to edit that one out. Why was the developer unhappy at their job?
Why?
They wanted a raise. That's a good one. You have permission to laugh at that.
Okay.
All right, I'm not going to go on. This is just terrible. You can do this on your own time.
And you can contribute your own, too.
Absolutely.
And if it amuses the dictator in charge, he will merge them in.
Yeah, do a pull request.
Okay. Love it.
This is where I usually ask you, so what have you got?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
All right. So who's talking to us today, Richard?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1409, the one we did back in February of 2017, 2 years ago. With Brock and Dominick talking about IdentityServer 4. We did an NDC London.
Yeah.
Now we're at NDC Porto. So almost the same thing. And there's a few comments on the show, which are great. This particular comment, admittedly 2 years ago, from Greg Lower, who says, "Hey guys, first, thanks for all you do for the development community. During the show, there was some discussion about how to achieve single-headed... You know, I have to read 3 whole paragraphs. This might take a little while.
Can you pass me that napkin? I got to blow my nose as long as we're in an edit point.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, watch closely. That's why they pay me the big bucks.
The magic of edit points, right? Like, none of this. All right, here we're going to go again.
Go ahead.
During the show, there was some discussion on how to achieve single sign-on, and the advice around using a common login web page on top of IdentityServer, and the usage of an in-app browser tab in conjunction with mobile apps on iOS and Android.
Right.
I was hoping to hear some similar guidance for single sign-on in a scenario where you have a web application and a desktop application, let's say WinForms and WPF. What is the recommended practice in a case like this? As far as I can tell through the research so far, it wouldn't work the same way as a mobile in-app browser tab scenario like you described. I think it boils down to the browser being more isolated under Windows compared to how mobile iOS, Android environments work. Would I need to settle for an embedded web browser approach? Well, you like Ionic, that kind of thing? If I did that, I still wouldn't probably provide true single sign-on if the user happened to open the browser separately from the desktop app and navigate to the web application. Is this only truly achievable if both applications are using Windows security, which in turn probably means Active Directory with ADFS? That would satisfy the requirements for some of my customers, but not all of them. I have some customers who need single sign-on across my desktop and WinForms app with common identity and user management solutions that are built on IdentityServer, which at this time was version 3, because it was 2 years ago. They've got later versions. And guys, let us introduce you, and I'm sure you have a better answer to this question than I have for Greg. So Greg, thank you so much for your comment. A copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you, and if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or via social media. We publish every show we don't publish anything to Google Plus because it's gone. Because we publish every show to Facebook, and if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
Music to Code By now up to 19.
19?
And
wow,
reduced the price to $39.
Ah, you're a good man. I take back all those things I said about you.
And I'm also creating a license for people who want to use it on their Twitch stream, because everybody wants to use it on their Twitch stream.
Jeff Fritz started that, right? Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. That's it. So, Domnick Baier and, what's your name again? You guys, so, I'm sorry. That wasn't funny. So, Dominick and Brock are here. We really don't need to introduce them, but I'll let them introduce themselves anyway. Go ahead. Dom.
I'm Dominick.
Hi, I'm Brock.
Well, I feel introduced now.
Okay.
Any comment towards the Greg there regarding WinForms and web apps and single sign-on?
So when I understood that correctly, he was asking, like, can you get single sign-on between the browser and his WinForms app and so on?
And maybe a mobile. Yeah.
A mobile.
Mobile app. Throw all the things in.
On a different hardware?
Well, that would be a little tricky, wouldn't it?
So
let's just do the WinForms and a web page scenario. So, I think what he's hoping for is I log in on a web page, and then when I open the WinForm app, it just says, oh, I already have credentials, and off I go. I can't imagine that works.
It does.
Oh, wow.
But they have to share the same browser. Right? So basically what the WinForms app could do is invoke the system browser, the default browser on the system.
Right.
It will pick up the existing logon session. It will come back to the WinForms app, say, hey, he's logged in, here's your token. That's it.
So he doesn't actually have to use the browser in the app. He just has to make
it
call
shouldn't.
to the app.
It can't use the browser in the app, because otherwise that the cookie container is isolated to the app, whereas you want to have the cookies on the system browser. So you have to share the browser.
So you could add to a WinForms app a call to see if there was a browser session that they could reference?
Well, basically what you do is you do process.start, pass in the start URL. This will start the default configured browser on the machine. That will pick up the existing logon session, and then will come back to the WinForms app and say, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
And there's a really good example of that, which is GitHub for Windows.
Right.
Yeah. They actually have a native app you can install. And one of their login options is to click a button and use your browser session. And if you're using GitHub for Windows, chances are you're already logged into GitHub.
Right.
So it's actually a really good example.
And I think it's an Electron app. So they're still writing JavaScript, but it is compiled executable.
Yeah.
Yep. But the trick is share the browser.
Yeah. Your other platforms pull the browser and see if they can get tokens from it.
Yep.
Okay.
But clearly the mobile is out of the question, because
changing devices.
No, you have to share that browser. So if it's on a different device, then it wouldn't work. It's the same as sometimes people ask, like, when I log into Chrome, and can I get single sign-on to Firefox? No. Yeah. So you can easily break that if you're using different browsers in different instances. Yeah. But that's sort of reality. The browser is the thing that actually maintains the session.
Okay. I like that.
So what's new in IdentityServer, gents?
Well, we've been doing a lot of work. There's always ongoing things to implement. I don't know, I'm trying to think of our list. So there are some new specs coming out from like the OAuth working group. One of them something called mutual TLS. There's also something called device flow. You know, kind of low-level stuff. Device flow is kind of an interesting one. That's targeted for these sort of headless device, like a smart TV.
Right.
And you want that to connect up to your, the back-end system that it wants to.
So you probably know that, like when you log in. So I bought my son a Switch, Nintendo Switch. So when you want to connect the Switch to your Nintendo account, the best thing they have is that you use your game controller to type in your password on So
that's fun.
One of the possible device flow, for example, addresses this where if they would use device flow, what they would do is they would just show a URL like maybe nintendo.com/login/ and then some number.
Right.
So you go to your desktop PC or to your mobile phone and type in that URL. You log in there, and then basically it makes the association with the console.
Okay.
So you basically type in
a little lower friction.
Type in the password on a real device and not on the
Would a phone be doable?
Yeah.
I guess a phone would be doable because then you buy your Xbox too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's clever.
What was Sorry.
So what I want to say is the remarkable thing I think about device flow is that it was the first time that somebody that isn't Brock or me implemented the whole feature, the whole spec.
Wow.
That's saying something.
Including the testing and the samples and the documentation and everything. So it was a contribution. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a good day.
What's mutual TLS?
Yeah. So that's the other thing we've been working on, and that's again the remarkable thing here is it's a complete sponsored feature. So that there's a company out there that needs that feature.
Oh. Right.
So they are basically sponsoring the development of it. So the mutual TLS, it's the so-called MTLS spec. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that, like in OAuth, they have this concept of client secrets, client IDs and client secrets, and most people use shared secrets for that, like passwords, but mutual TLS means that you're using an X509 client certificate for authenticating the client, which is a very strong authentication. So it's not for typical consumer applications.
Right, most consumers are not going to get a certificate.
No.
Right.
This particular customer has the scenario of they have medical devices, and when they produce them, they put a cert on the device itself, and they want this device to talk to APIs.
Okay.
So now what they were going to do is they're going to authenticate with that certificate against IdentityServer, and we're going to issue them a token, and then they're going to use the token to talk to the APIs. But there's an additional thing about the mutual TLS spec is. It has two parts, right? One is the authentication part, and then one is called so-called sender-constrained token. So what we do basically is once we authenticated the client, we put the thumbprint of the certificate into the access token.
Your certificates have thumbs?
Yes. Not funny. So it's a little funny. A little funny.
Hey, it's funnier than the dad jokes. I can tell you.
Yeah. Make a pull request. Yeah. Okay. So. Then we can embed the thumbprint of that certificate into the access token. So now the client is using the access token to talk to an API.
Okay.
And he will use the same certificate now to open the channel to the API. So the API can now look at the thumbprint of the TLS channel, compare it with the thumbprint in the cert. So now the client has proven that he's the same client that asked for the access token in the first place.
Nice.
Which is for medical scenarios, banking and stuff. It's a pretty important feature.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's going to be released next week.
And does that actually end up being their identity in total? It's just they provide the cert, there's no login requirement at that point?
Well, the cert authenticates the client.
Right.
Yeah, and then the thumbprint makes sure that the client can prove that he owns the token. It's called proof of possession. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, normally wasn't it just, as I remember TLS, it's like you're using the private key to do the encryption and they can only decrypt it with the public key so they know it's correct because it wouldn't decrypt otherwise.
Well, don't they use the private key to encrypt the asymmetric key that is used for that particular payload?
It uses TLS basically, and TLS is pretty complicated, but TLS has this, normally the job of TLS is to do server authentication. Right? I mean, so many people say like, oh, TLS does encryption. Yeah, it also does encryption, but it's not the most important part.
Right.
The most important part is that you authenticate the server.
Yeah, you're talking to the server you think you're talking to.
Yes. Yeah. And mutual TLS is an extension to TLS where you can, in addition, also authenticate the client.
Right.
Yeah, and he basically proves that he knows a private key.
Right.
Yeah. Without ever disclosing
revealing
that private key.
Right. That's
cool. And it's just an extension on OAuth basically to add this. Mutual TLS is a very strong type of authentication.
Yeah.
And as I said, it's not suitable for many consumer scenarios, but for many, for specialized scenarios like healthcare, governments.
I actually think a lot of IoT stuff makes sense in this, where it's often headless, there's no other way to prove identity.
Yes.
That cert ends up being the identity for all those things.
It is kind of an IoT scenario because these medical devices, they are
really
headless.
IoT. Yeah. All right, no, I like that.
So that's going to be released next week, actually.
Cool.
We're done with
this show
that.
comes out in May.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We are planning to do that first week of March.
Yes.
And you'll be on time.
Maybe.
So
See, the May's useful.
sort of
They'll be done. It'll be done for sure.
We might move this up in the date time continuum.
yeah. So the other thing we're working on, or actually have done at this point, is IdentityServer obviously is a server component, but you're going to have to write client apps that connect to IdentityServer to get tokens and do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other things we've done is updated one of our client libraries, the one that's targeted for JavaScript SPA style applications.
Okay.
And there's some updated guidance in the OAuth working group on how SPA apps should be doing all this, token-based security and API security. And the short history of it is that when they were first coming out with OAuth and how to SPA apps can do API security, this was a long time ago, so we didn't have all these modern features in browsers like cores and things like that.
Yeah.
So they had a simplified workflow for how your JavaScript app would go to the token server and get tokens. But it wasn't maybe the most ideal, but it was kind of the best we had at the time. But in the last many years, there's been lots of updates for browsers, lots of really new security features from the W3C.
Right.
And cores is one of them. And so they've done an update, if you will, to the guidance for these JavaScript applications. So it's a little bit of a protocol flow. So that's some of the work we worked on. That actually was also a sponsored project as well.
That's really great to hear that these features are getting sponsored.
Yeah, it actually is quite encouraging that companies are sort of stepping up. They're realizing, hey, these are important things that need to get done.
Right.
And we have backlogs of things to be done, and that helps prioritize.
Sure.
To be honest,
Money talks.
it certainly does. And yeah, and it was good. I mean, I enjoyed working on it. It was good to kind of get us updated with the latest guidance. So yeah, that's the big update.
So what's the problem? What makes SPAs different from a security context point of view? Why is this a problem?
Yeah. So we just covered this in our session
great.
earlier today, but I'll repeat that here. So the biggest thing is that in a browser, it's this shared environment that multiple apps are running. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have one tab open, loading one app, another tab from another website loading another app.
I might have 3 or 4 tabs from the same site. I'm that kind of guy.
Okay, I've seen people with 300 tabs still open, right?
Yeah.
So you have
there are bad people in the world. I get
yes, absolutely, and they're bad apps as well that you could be running in there. So if any one of those tabs is on a malicious website, and they are kind of guessing that you might also be logged into your good app, right? They may make requests to your good app.
No kidding.
And the big concern there is that, let's say you have a cookie, right? And they make a request. That browser is going to send the cookie even though it came from the bad website.
Wow.
So that's called cross-site request forgery. Mm-hmm. And so we need protections against that. And so it used to be where browsers didn't really have any.
It's actually funny. Whenever we explain the problem in our workshop,
people just get chills.
No, there's someone saying I don't believe that. If that would be true, the web would be broken.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Guess what? The web's broken.
It's duct tape anyway, right? I mean, the entire web.
Yeah.
Well, cross-site scripting used to be the thing.
It's still a big thing.
It's still a big thing.
Yeah. So is that how it's done with this forgery?
So no, the cross-site request forgery and the cross-site scripting are 2 different attacks. So we still have to defend against both. Okay. So the updated guidance for the OAuth thing that I was talking about was basically the mechanics of the original recommendation on how to build your apps. They were sending these access tokens back in the URL. And so those are in your browser history.
That's right.
And if people don't write their app the right way, they could still be there.
Sure.
And they could get leaked out to other apps. So the guidance is changing the protocol flow to not send things in the URL.
Yeah.
And using actually a more standardized flow. If you're a protocol wonk, right? That's the code flow in OAuth. And so there's more back-channel communication. And
because it's now possible to do back-channel communication in JavaScript.
Cores is available now.
Right, compared to 5 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, so as browsers add more features, we can leverage them and build better security systems.
Oh, I totally get that. I mean, not all cross-site scripting is hostile. Cross-site Forgery, I guess, is hostile.
Cross-site scripting is hostile, I think, by definition.
Okay.
Why would you?
Is there no scenario where cross-site scripting is legit?
It's like trying to remote control an application, right? So it turns out that cross-site scripting, I think, is still the biggest problem on the internet.
Really? And not, sanitizing your inputs in SQL injection.
Well, so if you look at the OWASP top 10, right, which is kind of like the most common document that talks about these vulnerabilities, they have number one is still what they call injection attacks. And that includes SQL injection, but also cross-site scripting. But from a web point of view, cross-site scripting is the one that gives us still the most headaches, I think, because it's pretty much game over.
Well, an injection is a very fixable problem if you're diligent, but I think cross-site is much harder to resist.
How do you
fortify yourself? So basically, cross-site scripting is another type of injection attack. Yeah. So actually, I just learned that recently. The term cross-site scripting was coined by a Microsoft engineer in 2006 or something like. It's a long time ago, but it's not the best word for it. So what people think these days it should be called is content injection.
Content injection.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds way more threatening.
And it is.
Like you know exactly what's going on.
And it's about injecting HTML, it's about injecting JavaScript, it's about injecting, all kinds of stuff that you probably don't expect.
Right.
So how do you prevent these things from happening in your app?
Right. So again, we have newer specs to help prevent with this. The most important one is something called CSP, stands for Content Security Policy.
Okay.
That's basically what happens is you can have your page render in the browser, and the web server, when it renders the page, it sends headers down to your browser.
Okay.
And what we're ultimately relying upon is the browser to enforce some sandboxing. So these headers tell your app or tells the browser, only let this JavaScript run and don't let any other JavaScript run. Okay. Problem is, if you've already have an existing, SPA app or JavaScript app that you've built, and it does highly dynamic stuff, and it's pulling in scripts from all kinds of places, you're kind of like the panda, it's already out of the box, cat's out of the bag, and your app is hard to lock down at that point. So it's a hard problem to solve. CSP is one of the ways to help solve it, and so again, you have to do this whitelisting thing of the
So you're basically saying, here are all the libraries I'm using, so these are the sites they're allowed to call.
Well, libraries add even more complexity because
they might have dependencies in turn.
Yeah,
right?
so
of course they do.
So some of the major frameworks that we use to build SPAs these days, Angular, React, right? Those tend to have really good sort of CSP protection built in, and they're safe, right? In terms of how they've been designed.
Yeah.
So the core libraries seem to be okay. But yeah, once you start adding in this widget to do that and this widget to do that from other organizations or who knows where, they themselves then may have weaknesses, if you will.
They haven't done a good job of their own content policies.
Typically, because if they're just some small development shop or a one-person building something
open source
cool.
troop, yeah.
So for example, so experts agree these days that if you're doing Angular or React, you're in a pretty good shape with cross-site scripting, from that point of view. But now you're pulling in some random library over NPM, for example, yeah. And both Angular and React have these backdoors, like unsafe write to DOM or something, yeah. And if you don't review every single piece of code they're pulling in, it might use one of these backdoors, right? Maybe for performance reasons, maybe because the developer didn't know better, whatever. So yeah, it's still a hard problem to solve. Content security policy is definitely working, but what we see from our consulting work is that it's only an effective tool if you do it right from the start. The first thing you should do is enable content security policy and then write your application CSP compatible and not make your CSP compatible to your app.
Right.
Yeah, and it's really hard to take an existing application, slap on CSP and think it'll work. So a good example is GitHub, for example. So if you open the GitHub page and look at the CSP header they return, it's like 5 or 6
long.
It's a long policy because they had to kind of take this huge application that already does many things, and they couldn't even one of the most important features of CSP is to turn off inline JavaScript.
Right.
So that basically you are forced to load every single JavaScript from a whitelisted location, basically. GitHub wasn't able to do that because you can imagine there are parts of the application which is older, they make use of inline JavaScript. You can't just turn it off.
Right.
Yeah. You're going to break the application.
Now, if you've got CSP in place in up front, you're just going to run into these issues as you go.
Absolutely,
yes.
absolutely,
So,
and that forces you to deal with the problem,
right.
like you said, up front.
You'll work around not doing inline JavaScript. You'll tackle that problem a different way.
That's the theory.
That's you would hope.
Yes.
The other thing is that they found out that whitelisting is not really effective. So there's a really good talk on Google that everybody should watch that is doing JavaScript. It's called Make CSP Great Again. And there were some researchers from Google, and they basically, Google has the technology to spider the web, I think.
Sure.
So they went to every server on the internet and checked how many of them are actually using CSP. And it was only 1.6 million websites in total.
That were using it.
Yes. That's the one, yeah.
That's the one. I'm just grabbing these links as we go so people can see them.
So, and they were able, from these 1.6 million policies, they were able to break 95% of them.
Wow.
And that, like basically people, and that's a sign that is too complicated, right? It's security that is too complicated.
Well, how many times have we heard that?
So
remember code access security? That was fun.
Don't. Don't.
I'm just tearing old wounds on Dom here.
But for example, what people do is they whitelist a CDN.
Oh, okay.
But that's
everything. That's now everything.
And what these guys found out is if this CDN contains a single JSON-P endpoint, you can smuggle in arbitrary JavaScript now via a whitelisted location from an so it's hard.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, yeah.
Well, guys, hold that thought while we take a moment for this very important message. And you're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's Richard Campbell. That's our friend Jerry Grouper. That's Dom and Brock, and we're here talking about IdentityServer. And got off on the security tangent, but I guess that's sort of what you guys do is you secure sites with IdentityServer, authentication, authorization. Is there anything else scary in the security realm that you guys have dealt with before, other than these attacks? Yeah, these cross-site attacks.
Well, another thing that's making the rounds right now is kind of like not really a new attack on OAuth, but it's been around for a couple of years. It's called substitution attacks, basically. So in OAuth, there's this thing called the code flow, and the idea was basically when you ask for a token, you don't get the token back straight away, you get a code, and then you have to use a client secret to exchange the code with the token to make it more secure that, if an attacker can intercept that code in the browser, he can't do it because he's missing the secret. And, attackers are pretty clever. So they found out, like, okay, I can't do that myself, but what if I give you a stolen code? Will you happily turn that stolen code into a token? And the answer is yes, they will. So, and OAuth doesn't have a solution to that problem. Because that attack came after the spec was written, basically,
So where are they getting the stolen codes from?
So maybe I make you install a malicious app on your phone, and you log in to whatever trusted website that produces the code, but the code is not sent back to you, it's sent to the attacker. And now I am logging into the real app, and when my code comes back, I exchange the stolen code with the real, my code, and then I'm impersonating you. So,
but I do have to exploit your device before I can steal codes.
Yeah, or maybe you leak them via the browser, maybe you're in a hacked Wi-Fi, or,
Maybe Troy Hunt's walking around with a pineapple.
Yeah, I mean, imagine any way that a code could be leaked.
Sure, off an unsecured connection.
And for example, So, there's another part of what Brock said before, that the guidance has changed around how to write sparse. There's another thing they're going to add, or a spec that protects you against this code substitution. It's called PKCE, Proof Key for Code Exchange. PKCE, for the record. You won't find anything with PKCE, I guess, or nothing security related at least. And that's another spec that actually protects the application from this attack. And the nice thing is that it was initially created to help with certain scenarios in mobile applications,
right.
But they found out that it actually works everywhere. So it works in JavaScript, it works in native applications, it works in web applications, and actually the nice thing that came out of the recent research is that people think we've been doing things way too complicated in the past.
Yeah.
So OAuth has 4 flows, OpenID Connect has 3 flows, so that makes it 7 in total, right? And when we did our workshop, the last slide was kind of like a cheat sheet, table with like, when you're doing this, use this flow. When you're doing that, use that flow. When you're doing this, and the way I had to explain that was like, it's like in the Matrix, where when Neo enters the Matrix, all he sees is the green stuff, and he can't make any sense of it, and you need like a certain experience to
be able to pick which flow you're going to go
and
with.
Sure.
The nice thing that comes out of this research recently is that you're probably going to get away with 2 flows in total.
Oh, wow.
And that's going to be one which is for server-to-server style applications where no human is involved, just 2 machines talking to each other.
Right.
And one more for all types of interactive applications, which includes web applications, native applications, the WinForms application.
Anywhere where you get input from a user.
Where's a human involved, yeah.
Okay.
So that's good.
That is good. I think that's, you're almost down to the ideal, which would be 1. But 2 is pretty good.
I think these 2 scenarios are fundamentally different enough that it's okay, I guess, that you have 2 ways of doing that. Yeah.
What about the multi-factor aspects?
That's unrelated to the protocol. The protocol just says you authenticate the user.
Right.
That's out of scope.
Okay.
Yeah, or to the discretion of the implementer.
Right.
But so multi-factor is obviously one way of authenticating a human. But I think the big news is really that you only have to learn these 2 flavors.
2 flows as a developer.
Yes.
Just work on these 2 flows and you'll be fine.
How many, I'm getting back to IdentityServer for a minute. How many contributors do you have actively working on your
If only I could answer that question. Should we go look at the server itself?
Yeah.
All right.
That's the main repo.
157 contributors.
That's really great.
And I'm sure there's plenty, in the lower half of the median that are 1 or 2.
Yeah, fix the comma.
Yeah, fix the comma. But there's Dom and Brock, and apparently Dom's kicking Brock's ass.
Wow.
And then the numbers drop down pretty quickly after that. But some contributions here and there.
It's still an area where, most people are scared contributing to the core.
It's security, It's not a trivial
place That's the guy.
Scott Brady.
Scott Brady that did the device flow implementation, for example.
Did it in 8 commits, too. That's rocking.
Pretty good.
We squashed them, I think.
Show of hands. Anybody here interested in contributing to IdentityServer? All right.
There's a
3,
couple
4,
here and there.
5.
We actually had a guy this week in the workshop who did a pull request while sitting in the workshop.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah, and he found a real bug actually, and he fixed it.
Wow.
Maybe the other thing that's worth mentioning is that it seems today is the end of a long journey that started with Microsoft.
Right.
That it seems we got told that today Microsoft shipped the IdentityServer integration. For ASP.NET Core. Yeah.
Wow.
So
what does that mean?
Yeah. So many years ago, and it's a long story, and I'm trying to make it really short enough. Is we got asked to give them feedback on their token stuff, and we told them it's not that great. So there was always an option of taking our stuff and integrating it into their into ASP. Katana by the time, actually, right?
Right, at that time.
And, big companies, lots of complications here, but...
working with Microsoft's always an adventure.
So last year, I think, Microsoft announced they're going to build their own token service.
Of course they are, because making another one is a great answer.
Yes. And there was actually really nice, the community basically gave them a lot of pushback on GitHub. There were hundreds of responses, or maybe not hundreds, but dozens of responses saying like, don't do that.
Right.
I mean, A, you have a track record of not
knocking it out of the park on this kind of stuff.
B, there's this thing that all of us are using already.
Right.
Why wouldn't you just use that?
And it's part of the .NET Foundation.
Exactly. Right. So Barry Dorrance, he's the
He is the curmudgeon in charge.
He's the
chief troublemaker.
Security PM of the .NET framework, actually. So he started this work. And basically what they're shooting for is giving people a very easy way, like file new project, and there will be a SPA template, and there will be an API template, and the idea is that IdentityServer will be inside of that template.
Wow.
So the clients will basically, get the token from IdentityServer, use the token to authenticate to the API, and they made it with 0 config.
Okay.
Wow.
Ouch.
And we know that this is probably not reality, but for the for the template's purpose, people can start using the technology without having to read the specs first. They should read the spec at some point, I guess,
right,
and learn about how this stuff works.
Wait, so does 0 config mean it's not configured at all? You have to configure it, or does it mean you don't have to configure it?
You don't have to configure it,
okay,
because it works for the scenario that this template is shooting for, which is one server that contains the SPA, the API, and the token service.
Okay.
And then in future versions, they're going to want to have more scenarios like around, separating them from each other and auto registration.
So does Microsoft still have their Azure Identity Service?
Yes, but they wanted something basically that people can use
locally
with
right
ASP.NET
away.
Core, without buying into a specific token product.
Well, that's great.
So that's there now.
We got told it's shipping with preview 4 of .NET Core 3, which apparently shipped today.
Nice.
Yep. And by the way, this is an edit point. What Richard's doing is, as they're talking about things, he's Googling them, grabbing the links, and putting them in the show notes. So
that's what I do.
Yep.
Every time.
Does anybody have a question for Dom or Brock?
Totally overwhelmed. That's fair.
Jimmy, you want to just throw him a meatball? I don't know.
I got nothing.
You got nothing?
Nice.
No? Anyone want a beer? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we all want a beer. Beer comes right after.
I got, 10, 15 minutes, something like that.
No, fine.
Security is a kind of a niche in the development world. How did you decide to get in there, and how did you start?
So,
years ago?
Let's repeat the question too.
So so your question is, how did security is kind of a niche topic? How did we get into it? Well, a little bit of history here. So Dominick and I met because we both taught at a training company called Developmentor back in the day. And I used to teach COM, right? By the way,
so not me.
I was always drawn to really complicated topics. Okay, and even COM security at the time was got to be a really interesting topic to me, and I just think it was fundamentally complicated topics that I could get my head wrapped around and tease apart, and then ASP.NET came out, and I started doing web applications, and was trying to tinker around with how their security system worked, and of particular interest to me was their membership system, like the database that held passwords, and just how that all worked. And I built a whole community project on that. There's a long story. I used to do a lot of online gaming, and we had this whole community, and we needed logins, and I built this whole thing in my spare time around that system, and on and on and on. So then Dominick and I met, and I'll let him describe his background in a minute, but given his background, we both totally hit it off because we were really interested in the same topics, and we were like, how does this work, and how does this work? And I remember before Skype, we would actually get on Microsoft Messenger, and we would both have the ILD compiler up on our screens, so we weren't really doing screen sharing, but we would be on Messenger, and it would be like, look at this line of code, what is this doing? And he'd say oh, I think it's doing this, and we're like, no, but this is, so we would we would pair before, I don't know, Skype and screen sharing and things like that. It was a little bit slower than it works now, but yeah. So anyway.
Brock actually decompiled ASP.NET 2.0 and recompiled it again so we can step through the source code.
Yeah.
Well, aren't you the hacker?
That was a little nerdy.
That's a little nerdy, yeah.
That's actually not the nerdiest thing I ever did, but that's I'll save that in case we have time later.
But 2.0, they had the membership providers, so...
Say again?
Yeah.
In 2.0, they had the membership providers.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
changed the security model around.
And
So you used Reflector, right, to export it into C#,
Right.
and then recompile it in Visual Studio, and change the strong name on it, right,
Yeah.
so that we can load it from IIS.
it took me 3 days.
Wow.
3 full days to decompile all their code.
Fix the code, I guess.
Yeah, fix up. They were like, because the decompiled code didn't really match the actual source code. So like some if blocks had the braces in the wrong location, while loops, it was just not quite broken, or it was a little bit broken. So I had to kind of guess. Yeah, it took me 3 full days, and then I remember I emailed my MVP lead. And I said, I've gone to all this work. Isn't this something I should blog about? And they were like, we'd rather you not.
How to decompile .NET.
Well, those were the days when they were more concerned about their intellectual property and before everything went open source.
Even when it was a product they never sold, that they always gave away,
Yep.
they still got really anxious about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I tried to contribute to Mono. Basically, they were missing claims. Yeah, that the claims class and claims principal and claims identity, it didn't exist in Mono. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So before you could actually contribute that code, you had to sign basically a contract saying, "I never saw the original source code of the .NET framework."
Right.
It's purely based on reverse engineering. And obviously, this isn't true if you have Reflector. Of course, you looked at the source code.
So
yeah,
if we can just geek out a little further, being the old guys that we are, you remember the Rotor project?
Yep.
So Rotor was an open source
shared source.
Shared source
source for
that's right.
academics.
Yeah, for academics only version of the .NET framework that Microsoft put out. And I thought when Miguel de Icaza started Mono that he may have used Rotor, and he says no. I never even looked at it because he didn't want the liability.
Yeah, he was super concerned about contamination.
Yeah.
He was he worked from the ECMA specifications, this sort of clean room implementation.
And that makes him even more of a rock star for basically rebuilding the .NET framework all by himself.
Yeah, crazy hard problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, so to answer your question, I was a developer. I studied information technology, and I was done studying in 1999, and that was the first .com crisis, basically, and there was no good jobs for developers out there. I mean, nothing interesting, at least. So I had a friend of a friend that just started a new security company, and they were all network security guys, like, routers and switches and firewalls, and the only thing they couldn't do is write code. So they needed someone to write scripts for them, to automate stuff. And I thought, okay, I can do that, like bash scripts and that kind of stuff.
So does that mean you were kind of like the DevOps of security back then?
I invented DevSecOps.
I think that.
No, I didn't. And while working at this company, I worked as a penetration tester, and I learned all that stuff. And it's super enlightening as a developer to see the other side, basically how people are attacking your software.
Sure, yeah.
Actually,
This is Troy Hunt's sort of hack yourself ideas.
Yes, but
right.
But
you did it first.
that was I was first, yeah. So, no, that was in 2000.
Yeah.
That was the golden days of penetration testing because we had Windows Server 2000.
Yes.
Every single day a new root level exploit.
Well, and yeah, IIS was like the Swiss Army knife with all the blades turned
Yes.
out. Like,
Yes.
which angle
Yes.
would you like to penetrate it on?
So
Turn your server into a waiter.
So actually, me and my colleagues had a competition going to a new customer, having a penetration test. Who is first domain admin?
It was a race. You're all going to get there. Who can get there fastest?
Me.
Right.
I still, up to date, hold the record 18 minutes from entering the company to being domain admin in their system. Anyways, after 3 or 4 years, I thought, like, okay, now I know how that stuff works, but I would rather prefer to work with developers again to tell them what they should do to secure their code against all of these attacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the .com crisis was over. There was, again, more interesting work for developers. So I became independent, started at this training company. Matt Brock took over their .NET security course from a guy called Keith Brown, who was the security guru by the time. And wrote a book, never write a book, it's a bad idea, but wrote a book, never write a book.
Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
Wrote a book about, it was called ASP.NET 2.0 security or something like that. More secure, whatever. Brock was the technical reviewer of that book. It got released. 4 weeks after the book got released, there was a new book called, a new version of ASP.NET called 3.0. So
I can feel your pain. I did the same thing with VB.
And so I went back to Microsoft and said, like, can't you at least like put a sticker on it, also covers ASP.NET 3.0? And it turns out the margins on books, they were so low that even getting a book back, putting a sticker on and sending it back to the bookstore didn't work.
Wasn't worth it. No. I found your book from 2006. I'm going to share that link with everybody.
Is it on eBay as a collector's item?
No, it's in the ACM digital library. If you're a member, you can get a free download of it.
You could probably get it on Google Books now.
Yeah, or BitTorrent.
Yeah, for sure. Average number of downloads in the past 12 months, 0.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is for ASP.NET 2, okay?
Thank God nobody's reading it.
And actually the most important event was when I started to write a new course, and you said, like, okay, we make a deal. You teach me all the stuff, and I'm writing the labs for you, because I hated writing labs. I still do today. So basically, I taught Brock all about WIF back then, right? The Windows Identity Foundation.
Yes.
And he wrote the labs for me. I wrote the slides, and that's basically how we started working together.
Was that card space?
Mm-hmm. WIF.
It's another thing you shouldn't mention.
See, I'm nothing but pain for you, Dom. I remember we did a great show with Kim Cameron. I love that guy.
Yep, he was a good guy.
It seemed like such a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
Because we still haven't really got. Are you paying attention to this thing with Tim Berners-Lee, the whole solid and?
Yeah, and actually, Kim Cameron has this new thing, right? The Distributed Identity Foundation, or whatever they call it, which uses blockchain, apparently.
Well, because blockchain will save the world, apparently.
But it's actually CardSpace 2.0, if you look at it.
Is it really?
Yeah, but taking a different approach of being distributed as of being like a centralized thing. So, yeah, the idea is still there, but I think, to be honest, what we see with my customers at least is that the pendulum is swinging back, that with all of the stories we hear about Facebook and so on, people are very... So social logins is not the biggest thing anymore.
No, they're going the other way.
Yes.
We, in one of the projects we were doing for the Red Cross and Humanitarian Toolbox, we included that social login aspect, and we were only talking to Red Cross people who were testing this app for them. And they're like, no, I'd rather enter a username and password. I don't want you to have anything to do with my Facebook or Google account. And that was really eye-opening, that regular mortal volunteers had that reaction.
And to be honest, the latest iOS operating system, every iOS has now a built-in password manager.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's probably the better solution to the problem than giving Facebook all of your login data.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask. Were these people using the app, were they savvy enough to use a password manager?
No.
Okay.
They were regular mortal, volunteers at Red Cross. Very nice people, but, I mean, besides us, who uses a password manager?
Every iOS user now. And
well, I mean, that's very interesting.
That's a great achievement from Apple.
Sure.
Basically, when you go to a website and it asks for, like a name and password, it basically says, that, should I create a password for you? And it just randomly creates a secure password, stores it on the device, and the next time you come there, it offers you to type it back in.
Okay.
So they made password managers compatible for mere mortals.
So basically mandatory. You have to fight it to not use it.
Well, I don't know, but I think they did a great job, like making non-technical people use a password manager.
No, I'm with you.
Do those sync over to your Mac?
If you want to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, therein lies the walled garden advantage, right?
They have their password manager has the worst possible name you can imagine. It's called iCloud Keychain.
Wow. So when I hear that name, I think password. Oh boy.
Yeah.
It's nice to see Apple naming things badly too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say it could be
Microsoft used to be the king of that.
It's a universal problem.
Yeah.
What do you mean used to be? They're still doing it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Well, now we have things that have cool names like Blazor. Speaking of that, any users using Blazor? Identity servers with Blazor?
Yeah, I don't think I have any customers using it, but I actually I get asked frequently, like, what should
What's
you
going
be
to happen?
doing, right?
Right.
And since Blazor's fundamentally just code running in your browser,
Yeah.
that falls under the SPA JavaScript category.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's JavaScript grown up.
Yeah, exactly.
And Blazor is really a SPA framework.
It is, absolutely. And so there's nothing special that we need to do or nothing different that we need
You're
to do.
still running in the context of the browser.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It just
So,
means
so we probably do have Blazor customers, we just don't know.
Just don't know.
Well, near as I can tell, it's still experimental enough that nobody's betting real projects on it.
It's really
yet.
cool.
It's all experimental.
Well, part of it's going to ship with .NET Core 3. It's
Yeah,
called,
the
it's
Razor
called now Razor
components.
components.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done that show.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, but again, it has nothing to do in the security context at all. It's just it's all going to be exactly the same thing.
Well, guys, this is a heck of a lot of fun. It's always good talking to you, and I can't wait to hear the next installment of IdentityServer. Hear about it. Thank you very much. Dom and Brock, give me a hand. And we'll see you next time on